until she was 101 years old, and I was raised by the village with so many pakeke to shape and mould me. And so it brings me great joy, Madam Chair, to hear that across the House we all agree that protecting and encouraging a quality of life for our pakeke, our elderly, is something that we must unite on and pursue together as a Parliament. Madam Chair, in Ikaroa Rāwhiti, this is a very pertinent topic. In Te Wairua Ho Pupu Ho Ningi Ningi Mā Tangirau, there is no aged care available. Since Cyclone Gabriel, the community has been rallying around to look at options. In other areas across Ikaroa Rāwhiti, there is less in-home care, less aged care, and a lot of our whānau actually being forced into hospital care. And I do appreciate everyone across Aotearoa who is taking care of our pakeke. They are repositories of knowledge, and where would we be without the sage advice of our kuia and karaua, whether we ask for it or not. But for those who do have the option, Madam Chair, to move into aged care, I think we need to think about what that means for the whānau and what that means for the community, because often that is not a choice made lightly. Often it's a choice made out of absolute necessity because they do not have access to the health care in rural Aotearoa where they live and where they are from and where they are an essential part of our community and our tikanga. So when people move into aged care, they are often deprived of seeing their mokopuna every day, and communities like ours are deprived of the intellectual property they take with them to sit in homes in urban areas. It's actually really sad, and I know I sound selfish, but that's a major taonga to extract from a community and a family. So let's talk about living well. Absolutely, I agree. Like I said, I had my nan until she was 101. She was sharp to the end and physically active to the end. Often, the vision we'd see, we'd drive up, cross her cattle stop, and Nan would be sitting in her garden on her beer crate, active to the end in spite of her arthritic fingers. I did not inherit her green thumb. Anyway, so living well in rural communities is a whole other consideration that I hope we will continue to consider as a united Parliament. As I said, our whānau barely have access to quality health care, let alone aged care, let alone programs to keep them active, programs for interactivity. And so when someone goes from being a stalwart at the marae, which is an absolutely crucial contribution to our communities and our society, to sitting alone in an aged care facility, that's not living well. So how can we work together to ensure no matter where in Aotearoa you live, you can live well? We talked about flexible care, and I hope we can work on that, because voluntary care of whānau has been mentioned, and often whānau cannot be remunerated for that. And yet they are with their whānau 24/7, learning skills no son or daughter should have to learn, but they want to care for their parent or their nanny and papa, and they want to keep them at home. So papakanga developments are another option we should look at. I'm so passionate about this, Madam Chair, I could talk about it forever, but in closing, there are many people doing great work around Aotearoa, but I do want to give a shout out to Tūranga Health, one of the best kaumātua programs in Aotearoa. It's such a vibe, over 100 pakeke getting together and enjoying themselves. And to the rest of us, just remember, never resist growing old. It's a privilege many are denied. Tēnā tātou.
Chair,
Carlos Chong.
I just want to begin by acknowledging our seniors, the people who give a lifetime of contribution to this country we proudly call home. New Zealand won't be the beautiful nation it is today without their hard work, sacrifice, and resilience. For that, we thank you. They are truly the best of the best, and they deserve nothing but the best in return. But, Mr. Speaker, the question we must ask ourselves is that in the past 20 years, have we done enough for them? Have we done enough to ensure that their later years are lived with quality, dignity, and security? Unfortunately, for many seniors across our country, the answer is no. Life can be extremely challenging for our seniors. Many face complex health issues, growing financial pressure, long waiting times for aged care service, loneliness, and in some cases, elder abuse. These challenges should concern every one of us, because how we treat our seniors reflect who we are as a society. And today, I just want to focus on two key issues: the financial burden and loneliness. During visit to retirement village and through conversation with seniors, one reality becomes very clear. How much you have saved often determines the quality of your retirement life. Financial stress should not be defining features of old age, but yet for many, it is. This is why I'm very pleased that National Party recent announcement proposing to lift the KiwiSaver contribution rate. This is a positive and a necessary steps. These changes will help ensure New Zealanders are more financially secure in retirement. Those extra savings may seem small at the beginning, but they can make a huge difference. The difference between struggling and living with dignity, independence, and a peace of mind in later life. The second major issue repeatedly raised by seniors is loneliness. Loneliness can be just damaging as physical illness. It affects mental health, emotional well-being, and even life expectancy. Many seniors live alone, separated from families, or feel disconnected from our communities. No one who has contributed so much to our country should feel forgotten and invisible. We must do more to foster connection through community programs, accessible service, and age-friendly environments that encourage participation and belongings. I also want to use this opportunity to speak up to our ethics communities. During recent hearing, it was mentioned that the ethics communities appears to have a lower demand for aged care service due to a strong family bonds and cultural traditions of caring for elders at home. Wow, it is true that Asian and ethics families deeply value caring for elders. But I want to make it very clear, that does not mean that we don't need the aged care service. The real issue is that many existing services do not meet our cultural needs. Language barrier, food preference, cultural practice, and expectation around families' involvement are often overlooked. As a result, seniors and family may hesitate to access services that simply do not feel appropriate or welcoming. Aged care service must be culturally appropriate, inclusive, and responsive to the diverse communities that make up modern New Zealand. Supporting ethnic seniors is not a special request. It is part of delivering effective care for all. It is time for us to act now, to do better, to be better for our seniors. They can live the quality of life they deserve. As I conclude, Christmas is just around the corner. This is a time of reflection, gratitude, and connection. I urge every single of you here to spend time with your loved one, especially our seniors, our elders. Show them the love, the respect, and the care they deserve. Don't wait until it is too late to say thank you. To all our seniors, we see you, we value you, and we own you more. And I want to wish every single one of you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Ruben Davidson.
Madam Speaker, thank you, Madam Speaker. It's great to be able to rise and raise some issues on this special debate on the quality of life for ageing New Zealanders. It is the last day of sitting for this House for the year, but hopefully that doesn't mean that this is the lowest priority, because it absolutely, as the previous speaker alluded to at the end of his contribution then, should be a priority for all New Zealanders, especially but not limited to this time of year when it's an opportunity to reconnect with our family. Now, at the heart of the quality of life for ageing New Zealanders is digital inclusion, because it should be a right, not a privilege, for all New Zealanders. We have the potential of a very exciting digital future in New Zealand. AI, artificial intelligence, offers huge opportunities for increased productivity, but also for better, more targeted, more specific access to screening and services for New Zealanders. We are also in the midst of a debate in New Zealand around a social media age restriction, which in fact has highlighted a number of issues around how online services can be better targeted, better tailored, better designed to be safer for New Zealanders of all ages. And I have also, in the Labour Party, talked about proactive steps we're taking to address needs in the primary healthcare sector, to relieve pressure in our hospital sector, which we know is struggling to keep up, with the addition of a Medicard, which allows New Zealanders to have much better record of the medical services they are entitled to, the medical screenings and services that they've already had, and makes sure that it's a Medicard New Zealanders take out of their pocket when they go to the doctor, not a credit card. But we do know on the subject of credit cards that digital devices cost money, and that connectivity to the services that digital devices provide access to also costs money. It's summed up very well by the message from Access Matters Aotearoa's Kōrero for Change, where they say technology has the power to connect, empower and transform lives, but only if it is designed with everyone in mind. And that is the risk that we see from a government whose main drive seems to be about cuts and cost cutting and trying to pull money out of very, very important places like our health sector. That design, fueled by that, risks leaving people behind. Some speakers from the other side of the House have raised the issue of social isolation and exclusion, a very real concern for our older New Zealanders, that either they do not have access to those services, or if they do have access to those services, that's at the expense of their engagement and their inclusion in community activities and in community conversations that are so important to address those issues of social isolation and exclusion. So the call to government is simple. Our senior sector, our ageing New Zealanders, need to be actively involved in the design and development of the platforms, of the tools, of the potential fantastic opportunities that technology provides. But if we do not involve our older New Zealanders, our ageing New Zealanders, in the design and development of those products and services, we absolutely risk excluding them from the benefits. Digital inclusion is key. Data security and transparency is absolutely vital as well. Trust needs to be central to the services that are provided for our ageing New Zealanders and for all New Zealanders on those digital platforms. And the good news is that there are many experts that the government can work with in this space. And I'm going to name some, but not all of them here. Katoa Connect, the Digital Inclusion Alliance Aotearoa, Moana Connect, the incredible team at Fibre Whare, the Digital Equity Coalition Aotearoa, and a shout out especially to SeniorNet in New Brighton, Phyllis and the amazing team there who ensure that some of our older members of our community are still connected, because as technology advances, our community can only advance if we leave no one behind.
The time for this debate has expired. Members, we now come to the debate reflecting on local issues arranged by the Business Committee under Standing Order 80. Would some honourable member care to move that the House take note of local issues?
Move.
Dana Kirkpatrick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What a privilege it is to speak to this local issues debate on the final day of the House sitting in 2025. It has been a whirlwind year on the East Coast, and there's been a lot on. But I want to speak about what has been achieved by this government in the East Coast electorate and what announcements we've made to address some of the key issues we faced as an East Coast community. Also, as a number of small and isolated rural communities across a vast and diverse landscape. We forget too easily what has been done, and I think it's time to reflect on a great year of work. I did a quick add up of the money spent announced in and around the electorate, and it runs into hundreds of millions of dollars, possibly billions. This is good news, of course, for the regions of Tairāwhiti and the Eastern Bay of Plenty. But the real question, Madam Speaker, is what does it add? What does it usefully bring? Does it bring solutions that enable productivity and growth? Will it create jobs? Will it support communities and whānau? Firstly, I want to acknowledge all of the social sector agencies across the East Cape electorate this next year, who deliver essential support throughout the region. They do very challenging and difficult work across there, and it's wonderful to see them always smiling and happy. But also, Madam Speaker, infrastructure is the backbone of our regional economy. Roading projects aren't just about safer roads and cyclone recovery, they're about unlocking growth. When freight routes are resilient and efficient, forestry and farming exports move faster, costs drop and productivity rises, Madam Speaker. So on State Highway 35 and State Highway 2, there are many, many projects, big and small, running into the hundreds of millions of dollars. And I want to acknowledge all those local contractors who've contributed to the work and have gained valuable experience and capability by doing so. That strengthens their own businesses going forward. A small group of people have lobbied hard to ensure that local businesses are used wherever possible, none more so than the inimitable Willie Te Aho. Madam Speaker, the work on the roads in Tairāwhiti and on the Eastern Bay of Plenty includes the Hikawai Bridge, $50 million project, the Mangahauini Gorge, $50 million, Rotatahi Raising, the Nisbets Dip, the Coates Corner projects, 170 dropout sites and culverts fixed at a cost of $90 million, Tineroto Bypass, $45 million, and bridge replacements, $107 million. If you add into that the Waikari Gorge, which is not really in my electorate, it's in the good electorate of my colleague Katie Nimmin, MP for Napier, but it is the one route south for anyone from Tairāwhiti, $400 million, brings that total to almost $1 billion spent in roading and infrastructure, because we also have to add in the Eastern Bay projects, the Matikirapu roundabout, $10 million, the Ohiwa Beach Road State Highway 2 intersection, $10 million, and the Peketahi Bridge, the greatest project released this week, $69 million, Madam Speaker. Every dollar we invest today in these infrastructure projects creates jobs, strengthens supply chains, builds a future where prosperity is shared across Tairāwhiti and the Eastern Bay of Plenty. One of the real challenges in my community has been housing. High rents, short supply of quality housing available for rent and social housing, and a growing concern about homelessness, and that's shared across the country. There have been a number of housing projects already completed in the last 2 years in Whakatane, Opotiki and Tairāwhiti, but in May the government announced $49 million of funding into a partnership with all the local iwi, a total of $80 million project it is, to build 150 homes. A much-needed Crown and iwi project which made all of us very proud to be there that day. And just a couple of weeks ago, Minister Chris Bishop announced a further large investment into housing in the electorate. It's clear, he said, that the East Coast has widespread unmet housing need, with more than 700 people on the housing register, one of the highest in the country. Good work coming for Kawerau, Whakatane, Opotiki and Gisborne, where more than between 210 and 230 social houses and affordable rentals will be delivered in Gisborne and the Eastern Bay of Plenty. Critical to cultural support on the East Coast has been a project that we've been very proud to do this year, $50 million, Madam Speaker, to shift 5 marae out of flood zones onto safer and higher ground. We all know the contribution that marae bring, particularly in times of crisis. We only need to look at the work of the small community of Kutarere near Opotiki, in the Opotiki flooding just recently. These marae to be shifted, 2 of which I have connections to, Takipu and Rangatira at Te Karaka, and the others, Mangatuna, Puketawai and Okuri, were inundated in Cyclone Gabrielle. They're all being shifted and will continue to be the heart of their local communities as a result. The Rangatira Marae Trust just had an interment ceremony at the weekend to honour their whare te whakahau, their whenua and their tupuna. Sadly, I missed it because I was still on the way home from urgency, but I understand it was a wonderful ceremony and I congratulate them on that. Health and access to health services has always been an issue in isolated and remote communities, and I acknowledge the work being done in places like Kawerau, Murupara, Opotiki and Te Kaha, including Omaio and Waiho Bay, for their undying commitment to delivering high-quality health services. I think we still have a way to go for rural and isolated rural health, but I'm pleased that Te Whatu Ora is working with those communities to understand how they can help them better. And I'd just like to also note that in the last year we stood up the urgent and emergency care facility at Puhikaiti in Gisborne to help with after-hours care to take some pressure off the ED department at Tairāwhiti Hospital. In the Eastern Bay of Plenty, the priority has been the return of secondary maternity services, which is expected in April next year. In Whakatane this year, we supported the Waiariki Whānau Mentoring Resilience Cafe to deliver extended services to help with mental health conversations, a much supported kaupapa in Whakatane as it supports people in times of need and it gets things done. I have so much respect for the people who work at Waiariki Whānau Mentoring. I have admiration for the whānau there, their personal life experiences, which are sometimes harrowing, but their resilience and ability to change not only their lives for the better, but therefore help others change their own lives is one of the most incredible things to watch. In terms of economic productivity, there are 2 other investments I want to mention. Firstly, our regional airlines, Air Chathams and Sun Air, which provide lifelines across our remote region, will receive assistance from the Regional Infrastructure Fund in the form of $30 million in loan availability. We all know that reliable air services are critical for the East Coast economy and regional connectivity. None of us want to see further cuts to flights or, worse than that, total withdrawal of services. So I'd like to thank the Good Minister, Honourable James Meagher, for his assistance. He also helped, Madam Speaker, in the other investment, the $5 million into Eastland Port, to provide container shipping capability at the port in Gisborne. This is transformational for the economic sectors in Tairāwhiti, including wood processing, kiwi fruit and produce exports, and it provides the ability for investors to bring new innovation and development into the region. Every investment, Madam Speaker, that we make in bridges, ports, airlines strengthens the heartbeat. It helps our producers get goods to market faster and more efficiently. When freight routes like State Highway 2 and State Highway 35, when ports and airlines are resilient, producers spend less on transport, more on growth and innovation. It means higher productivity, stronger margins, more jobs in our communities. Our farmers and orchardists are world class. They produce food and fibre that feed families here and overseas, and we have backed them, Madam Speaker, with modern infrastructure, reduction in red and green tape and smart regional planning. We're ensuring their success for generations to come, fixing the basics and building the future. There are so many projects to list, I couldn't fit them all in this speech. I did a little flowchart thing here. There were way too many to get into this speech, so we had to put that over there. There are so many projects, but I couldn't fit them all. I'm pleased that by combining more than many $1 million of investment, hundreds of millions, in housing infrastructure, cultural heritage and trade. These initiatives are creating thousands of jobs, enhancing safety and laying the groundwork for a much more prosperous future for our community. Finally, so many people as well and organisations I want to mention here, but just not enough time to give it due credibility. Please know that all of those organisations I have visited over this year remain an important part of the advocacy work and the work of a good electoral representative MP. There is nothing more important than taking the frontline issues and making sure our people across the region are heard. I want to make a special mention of those people who do not get a break over Christmas, the emergency workers, Hatu Hone St John, firemen, police officers, doctors, nurses, crisis workers. You are all in our thoughts this holiday season. Thank you for your service and commitment to our people. And also, one more mention to those particularly wonderful volunteers in Opotiki and Matata, who deliver fatigue stops on New Year's Day, when the rest of us are all suffering at home. For all of those young people and some not so young, travelling from Gisborne's Rhythm and Vines to further parts of the country. It is a commendable task, and I know those who stop off are extremely grateful. Madam Speaker, the greatest gift you can give at Christmas time is time. If everybody gives someone who needs it a little bit of time, it goes a very long way to supporting them and making Christmas a better place for everybody. And I commend everybody who would like to possibly do that for someone they maybe have never met before. It makes a big difference. Thanks to the businesses and the whānau in my community, it's been a wonderful year, and bring on 2026.
Thank you. Now, the Labour Party have indicated this is a split call, so I call on Honourable Carmel Sepuloni.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to start off by acknowledging all of our NGOs across the country that are working hard at this time of year with the many families that are struggling to make ends meet, with the many families that wouldn't otherwise be able to put food on the table over the Christmas period, that wouldn't otherwise be able to afford presents for their children, Madam Speaker. And I particularly want to acknowledge one of these NGOs that I was able to go and visit with some other Labour MPs on Monday, an NGO that has worked really well across different administrations with national governments, with Labour governments, with different political parties, and that organisation is Vision West in Glen Eden. They put on a Christmas from the Heart event each year. This year they will be giving out 1,000 packages to whānau, which includes not only a ready-packed food package, but the ability for them to go and choose some of the items off the shelf themselves, and also includes the ability to be able to select presents off the shelf for their children. The vast majority of what they have has been donated by the New Zealand Food Network, by companies and organisations and businesses, and also from the local schools who, like my son who's at intermediate in that area, did a drive to take Christmas presents along to contribute to that particular Christmas from the Heart effort. But Madam Speaker, despite the fact that I want to acknowledge all of their efforts, I primarily want to acknowledge how tough families are doing it right now. And when we were there, they talked to us about the fact that there are so many working families that are coming through the door now, households that have 2 working parents that can barely pay the rent, let alone the electricity bill, and that struggle to put food on the table and wouldn't otherwise be able to afford anything else for their children at this time. And reflecting on that, I have to say to that side of the House, there is a high level of disappointment that you have not delivered on the promise that you made before the last election. And that was to alleviate the pressure on these families with the cost of living. What we've seen is that inflation has continued to go up, that their incomes have not gone up to the same extent. We've got a government that has made the decision 2 years in a row, was it 3 years in a row, to not even lift the minimum wage to keep up with inflation. And so some responsibility has to be taken from that side of the House for the struggles that these families are going through. And it's not just families with children. There's an increasing number of senior citizens who are struggling to be able to pay for the basics, who are reliant on organisations like Vision West for support at this time of year, Madam Speaker. And I want us all to reflect on that. You know what I don't think? I do not think that any politician in this House is heartless. I do believe that we care about those living in poverty and that there will be families out there that have very little to celebrate at this time of year. But what I also think is that unfortunately we've got a government who have chosen to prioritise the wrong things. And it's not those families who are experiencing hardship across the course of the year and particularly at this time of year. We've also got a government who is out of touch with that experience. Now, I want to recognise that on all sides of the House, there will be MPs who grew up across the course of their life and probably experienced some hardship themselves. But sadly, what we know is that there are people who seem to forget what that feels like and forget that they have a responsibility to put the ladder out for others, to give back and to ensure that the next generation has a better experience than what some of us in this House may have had. And so, Madam Speaker, today I'm talking about Vision West and Glen Eden in my electorate, but I'm acknowledging every single NGO that is doing it tough themselves with very little funding, looking after whānau who are doing it incredibly tough with the cost of living. And Madam Speaker, I want to acknowledge them and their volunteers and all those making an effort to make this a better time of year for those whānau than it otherwise would have been.
Honourable Kieran McAnulty.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to start my contribution to the local debate, given that this is the last opportunity that I'll be speaking this year, to acknowledge everyone that works here at Parliament that enables us to be able to do what we need to do. Their roles are vast and there are many of them and they all work incredibly hard, and so I wanted to acknowledge their contribution to what is an essential part of our democracy. Now, of course, one of the challenges with a local debate is to identify one thing to talk about. You've got 5 minutes and there are a lot of things that are facing our regions at the moment. I'm conscious of the community of Ashurst, which has struggled since the government pulled their school bus services to get their kids to school in Palmerston North, and I'm looking at those that are working tirelessly to help those in Masterton that have found themselves homeless, and the numbers continue to grow under this government. But the one thing that I really want to focus on today, Madam Speaker, is Wairarapa Hospital. And the situation that the government has put that hospital in and our region in is frankly nothing short of a scandal. Now, a brief history before I continue. Wairarapa Hospital was deemed to be structurally unsound, it is not fit for purpose, and it is so bad that Health New Zealand sought $90 million in damages to completely replace the hospital. The only course of action they had available to them was to sue the Marsden District Council, who was essentially the last person standing in this. The contractors and everybody else involved were unable to be joined into that action, and they settled out of court. I have never once sought to find out how much that settlement was, but it is clear from the course of action that Health New Zealand has taken that Masterton Hospital is not safe and is not large enough to meet the needs of our region, and it needs to be fixed. Health New Zealand settled out of court, and we have spent the last year and a bit trying to find out from the Minister where that money has gone. We accept that the settlement is confidential, but one facet of democracy that this government has not lived up to is transparency and integrity, and it is a basic question to ask of ministers: where have they spent the money? Simeon Brown has refused at every opportunity to answer that question. We have long suspected it's because he's taken that money and he has used it to fill the hole in his health budget. We complained to the Ombudsman, they looked into it, and they finally agreed and forced Health New Zealand to answer that question. And now we know for a fact why Simeon Brown refused to answer it, because that's exactly what they did. They took the money. We wanted to know how much of that settlement, which was for the sole purpose of fixing our hospital, would be ring-fenced for Masterton Hospital, and the answer is none of it. Absolutely none of it. So here we are in Wairarapa Hospital with incredibly hard-working staff who are understaffed and overworked. The last estimate was that we are 40 nurses short and they are not allowed to hire. So not only are they overworked, but they are working in unsafe conditions that this government got money to fix, and they took it. They took it to fill the hole in their budget. It is shameful, it is deceitful, and it is a genuine scandal. And they try and make noise, but they have nothing to make noise about, because everything I've said is a fact. They have taken the money. They have taken the money that would have given Wairarapa patients a safe and effective hospital to attend, and given our nurses and our doctors and our health professionals a safe working environment. Filling the budget and trying to plug the holes was more important to them than keeping our patients and our health professionals safe. So as they work over Christmas and they treat those who need their help, they know that they will continue to do so next year in a hospital that isn't structurally sound, isn't fit for purpose and isn't safe. And that is on Simeon Brown, that is on Health New Zealand, and actually it is on Mike Butterick. The local MP has said nothing, not a peep, not a single word about this. He has had constituents get in touch with him, he's ignored them. He has asked no questions. He has made no representations on behalf of Wairarapa. It is a disgrace, and it is on each and every single one of them for voting for a budget that had $1 billion hole in their health budget that they had to steal our money for our hospital for their purposes.
That's right.
Chloe Swarbrick.
E te manga e tēnā koe, tēnā koutou, e te whare. Madam Speaker, almost a decade ago now, I fell down a rabbit hole that led me to this place. Almost a decade ago, I was working at Neck of the Woods on Karangahape Road. I was in the midst of opening a little art gallery and coffee shop in order to support our young local creatives. And I was on 95 BFM, the #1 alternative radio station in Auckland. And Madam Speaker, I spent a long time, years in fact, interviewing politicians that I simply could not understand. I could not understand the disconnect between the things that they were saying and doing and the very clearly expressed needs of our communities. So, Madam Speaker, challenged by my then producer, I ended up throwing my hat into the ring and ultimately landing in this place. Madam Speaker, Auckland Central is a place that is not wanting for talent, for creativity, for innovation, nor for care. Our communities deeply and profoundly care about each other, especially in the face of the issues that have been exacerbated by this government's intentional decisions. Madam Speaker, those structural barriers to people achieving their aims, their vision, their desire for contributing to our communities and living a good life look like the kinds of so-called difficult choices that this government has made. Difficult choices like tax cuts for landlords on their 7th rental property while choosing to push more people into poverty and homelessness, which we have consistently challenged the Prime Minister to come to the streets of Auckland Central to meet the people, including the children who his government's decisions have made homeless. Thus far, those calls for him to confront the consequences of his actions have fallen on deaf ears, and now we hear that the government is moving to criminalise the consequences of its own actions. Difficult choices, Madam Speaker, like the government choosing to freeze hiring for the health sector at the front line, which they still continue to say is not happening. Yet, if you are to listen to the very nurses and the doctors and those involved in the healthcare system, very clearly reflects their experience, namely at the likes of Auckland Hospital, just across the bridge from that very Karangahape Road that I was referring to earlier. Those difficult choices, Madam Speaker, to freeze those frontline hires contrasted quite strongly with the government's decision to find $12 billion down the back of the couch for new military spending at the behest of none other than Donald Trump. And then this government has the gall to speak about hard work being rewarded as they make decisions to create the rules of an economy that reward speculation, and they sell this country off for parts. So my question to members of the government is, have any of you actually worked hospo? Because that indeed is an incredibly difficult job to do, and one which, if you want to talk about hard work, should support those who are doing that incredibly challenging work. Madam Speaker, when I talk to my small businesses in Auckland Central, they will consistently raise the challenges with people's lack of discretionary income, which again comes as a result of this government's intentional decisions to punch down on hard-working, regular people. And then this government's response to all of that, Madam Speaker, is to make those small businesses internalise the cost of PayWave instead of the commercial banks who consistently are making record profit. The point that I am making here, Madam Speaker, is that all of these decisions, which are about our country, ultimately end up impacting all of us locally. And while we need to build the power at a grassroots level to build up towards that political change at a central government level, well, Madam Speaker, this is why it is so important for New Zealanders from Auckland Central to across Aotearoa to understand that the power rests in their hands and that they should not let the people who are laughing their way to the bank, screwing those hardworking New Zealanders over, define the terms of what is possible in our politics. Because, Madam Speaker, back to those fundamental ingredients in Auckland Central of the care and the compassion and the creativity and the innovation. Those could be unleashed if we decided as a House of Parliament to create the rules that enabled them to flourish instead of punching down on them as this government's decisions so consistently do.
Cameron Luxton.
Look, local body elections don't always get the attention like general elections do. They don't dominate the radio, they don't clog up the news coverage, but in 2025, what happened in local government matters more than many people think, because councils have a growing influence over the cost of living, local infrastructure and our daily lives. And I want to thank the people who this year put themselves forward to stand for local bodies. Standing for council is not always glamorous, Madam Speaker. Standing for council is demanding. It involves real personal sacrifice, family commitment. Yet across the country, good people, business owners, parents, professionals, farmers and community leaders have stepped forward because they care deeply about their community. A strong democracy relies on people who are prepared to serve, and whether they win or lose, those candidates who stood deserve our respect for putting their names forward and engaging with the democratic process. At this year's local election, for the first time, ACT made the deliberate and organised effort to contest local government through the ACT Local campaign. That decision was driven by a simple belief: local government should focus on the basics, spend ratepayers' money carefully and be accountable to the people who fund it. ACT Local candidates stood on clear principles. They argued that councils should concentrate on core services like roads, water and waste, stick to essential infrastructure rather than expanding into areas better handled by community organisations or that are the purview of central government. ACT Local candidates stood for lower rates, fiscal restraint, transparency and back to basics common sense decision making. Importantly, ACT Local candidates didn't pretend that local government is apolitical. Councils make real choices about spending, regulation and the way our future in our communities and our cities will be decided. ACT believes voters deserve clarity about the values and the ideas that councils bring to these decisions. In 2025, we succeeded, ACT Local succeeded, in electing representatives across the country. These newly elected councillors are carrying out the responsibility of delivering on those promises, standing up for ratepayers, asking tough questions of the council, refocusing the council on what really matters. Their presence has already shifted the tone of the local debate, bringing stronger scrutiny and clearer accountability to council chambers. But while there is much to be encouraged by, particularly the quality of candidates, not just in ACT Local but around the country, and the ideas on offer, there is one issue that lingers and it is large, and regardless of politics, we should be paying attention to it. It deserves our consideration, and that is voter turnout. Once again, participation in local government elections has been concerningly low. In many parts of the country, little more than a third of eligible voters took part, and in some communities turnout was even lower than that. That means decisions affecting entire cities and districts are being made with a minority mandate. This isn't a new problem, but it's a pattern which must improve. When turnout is low, it's a warning that councils have become disconnected from their communities they serve, and good people may decide it's simply not worth standing in future elections. Democracy becomes weaker, not because of bad intentions, but because of disengagement. Engagement is crucial at local government, because this is the level of government that affects our daily lives. We are a self-governing society, and partaking in the democratic process is what is the cornerstone of that system. Councils decide how much we pay in rates. They decide where the roads are maintained, where the water infrastructure is upgraded. They control how quickly a consent is issued and how, as I say, our towns and cities will grow. That is why turnout must improve. New Zealanders say again and again that we want councils that focus on core services, that respect ratepayer money and know the value of that dollar. And this must be delivered. Voting isn't just a formality. It's how we signal what we expect from those who govern locally. In the 2025 local elections, there was a call for good candidates who stood up. Act Local showed that good ideas and principles matter at the local level. Now the challenge is for our system to prove its responsiveness, to prove why there is value in voters being engaged. Madam Speaker, this country is made up of neighbours and neighbourhoods, living together and advancing New Zealand. Local democracy is a pillar of how we do this. Thank you.
Andy Foster.
Madam Speaker, I'm delighted that you're in the chair because I rise on behalf of New Zealand First to speak as a List MP about one of my recent visits to the West Coast. And it's a place, Madam Speaker, as you would know, I see the big smile there, of wonderful people, of strong communities, of rich and often tragic history, and of deep connection to a place which is utterly beautiful. The West Coast, Madam Speaker, was seen, as you know, of many bloody battles. I visited Mawhera, a part of the Pounamu Pathways, which I think was supported by PGF, and saw the confronting interpretation of Ngāi Tahu's repeated brutal invasions and ultimate eradication of the local iwi. It's pretty confronting stuff. And then for a while, in the 19th century, the West Coast was home to more than 10% of New Zealand's entire population. What was the reason for both of those? It was mining, Pounamu and gold. Mining was also a big part of my visit, and I was told that one mining job on the coast creates more than 3 across the whole community, and it's also by far the highest value per capita of any job in any sector. I visited Endura Gold Mine on the Snowy River near Reefton. They started in 2020 and already they have drilled 12 kilometres of tunnel. It looks really, really promising in terms of fact they're really certain of the resource that's down there, and they're now about to start investing $80 million in a processing plant. Now, Labor often bemoans losing construction jobs, and I suspect mining jobs to Australia. But what did I see there? Australians coming back and working in the Snowy River mine. And one other thing I did note there was that the key investor in the mine was the super fund, the Australian super fund. Reefton, I visited Reefton as well. I love this town. When we had the flag referendum on, I saw one Kyle Lockwood flag in the street, and the rest were festooned with New Zealand flags. Now, this was a great place. But New Zealand is not only proud of being a Reefton's not only proud of being a New Zealand town, it's also proud of being the first town in the Southern Hemisphere to have electrified street lights. And I also visited the Powerhouse Trust, which has restored some of that power system that ran it, and is now selling 1.8 megawatts of energy back to the grid. And then there was Blackball. Now here's a town that was down on its luck, a mining town again. It was a community that was really struggling, but was turned around with a bit of support, including from Internal Affairs. The community has led that restoration. They've focused on celebrating their history and telling the fascinating stories of that place. The first project that the community decided it wanted to embark on was restoring a mining chimney. And they've also restored a community hall, heritage buildings, erected a replica of an aerial cableway pylon that used to take the coal, and some of the kids hopped on the coal and told those stories. Coal, yes. And so they're telling the stories of those places. There was an outdoor museum display interpreting the birthplace of the Labor Party out of the strike action originally in 1908. Got to say, they're not feeling a whole lot of love from the Labor Party over recent years. What happened? It also reflected on the Pike River disaster. Madam Speaker, Blackball is clearly a town which is recovering. It's attracting new residents and businesses, and you can see and feel the pride and care for the town, its buildings and its structures. And it's a great example, I think, of supporting and empowering a community to get on and develop their own future. And then there was West Coast Mineral Sands. Now, they are mining mineral sands near Westport, and they've got consented plans for another site south of Hokitika. They started with a paddock. First soil turn just 3 years ago, December 2022. First exports mid-2023, and they're now exporting 120,000 tonnes of product a year. They're looking, Madam Speaker, we often talk about value add. They're looking to add very significant value by separating those mineral sands, so it's not just treated as low-value construction sand. So what do they produce there? Zircon, that's used in ceramics, mouldings for factories, etc. Titanium, used in medical products, jet engines and paint. Garnet, water jet cutting, and can also be used on roadways and airport runways to add grip and life for road surfaces and road paint. And then there's all those rare earths used in magnets essential for EVs. wind turbines and touch phones. So a clear example where mining is actually helping us to become more sustainable. Their vision is to become an intergenerational business. They've got about 70 staff at the moment. The aim is 200 to 300 in the Bulla, and then Hokitika another 70 odd. I want to touch finally on one last thing before also saying West Coast Development West Coast, who I spend a lot of time with, they're doing an absolutely fantastic job both supporting development on the coast but also building the fund that they got, which was 92 million back in 2002, I think it was, 2012, sorry, and it's now worth 150 million plus all the investment they've made. But it's the future of the Landcorp site there, which the West Coast Mineral Sands are doing a lot of their mining. We talk about, there's been some talk about selling Landcorp. We obviously don't support that at all, but that site is really, really important, not only for West Coast Mineral Sands, but also potentially for the future of Westport and the potential of any relocation. It's really essential that we don't sacrifice those opportunities. And Madam Speaker, I think we need to stand alongside the West Coast community. Both our government agencies and New Zealand First certainly stands alongside the West Coast and its potentially prosperous future.
E te pika. E te pika today marks my 70th day as the Member of Parliament for Tāmaki Makaurau, and I've been saving this kaupapa kōrero for this very moment. It's my gift to the House before it rises for 2025, and in presenting this gift, I honour Takutai. You see, it was Takutai who started this hikoi for Te Pāti Māori, and it is with her in mind that I stand here proudly to give rise to the voices of our rangatahi. Specifically, I give rise to the most vulnerable rangatahi in Tāmaki Makaurau, who are living with real, genuine fear from not knowing where they're going to sleep tonight, tomorrow night, or even on Christmas Day next Thursday. Housing remains the most urgent, pressing issue in Tāmaki Makaurau, but homelessness, it is the gift that keeps on giving. The numbers have gone up, not down, and the latest figures tell us that more than 112,000 people across Aotearoa are without shelter and seriously deprived of a stable home right now. Just the other day, the Salvation Army reported homelessness has more than doubled in Tāmaki Makaurau in the past year alone, rising from 426 to 940. How is that possible, Madam Speaker, that the richest city in our country also carries the shame of the worst homelessness crisis? What's worse is that 50% of all of those who are homeless right now are under the age of 25. Madam Speaker, that's too close to home for me. My mātāmua, my eldest child, is 25. For any mama and kuia out there, it's gut-wrenching and heartbreaking to see tamariki suffer. It is as if they're our own babies. That's just how us Māori mama tick, that when one of our babies suffer, we all do. Our babies belong to the village, and in this context, when we speak to homelessness, the village is Aotearoa. The recent More Than a Home report commissioned by Mate Huruhuru in collaboration with Manaaki Rangatahi tells us that the urgency of Tai Tamariki homelessness is no longer just a crisis, it is a generational failure. We have to do better. During my by-election campaign, Madam Speaker, I saw things I cannot unsee. I saw a mum pushing a newborn baby in a trolley at 7 a.m. along the Papatoetoe streets. It's become normalised. Māori wardens deal with it every day. I also saw a kuia who had made a makeshift home out of a bus stop on Robertson Road in Mangere. I also saw parents with young children sleeping in their cars across the road from some of our most prominent malls and washing up in public toilets. There are kids that are going to school that are not going to school, not because they choose to or their parents simply don't want them to go to school, but because they can't afford a roof over their heads. What I didn't see, Madam Speaker, is rangatahi homelessness, and I'll tell you why. It's not as obvious. It's invisible. And it is growing in silence. It's growing because $79 million was cut from housing support programs in the last year. It's growing because it's a lot harder for whānau to access emergency housing. It's growing because there is no real investment in mental health and rehabilitation services and addiction services. It's growing because this coalition believes that punishment is better than prevention. It's growing because not one government policy has been designed specifically with rangatahi in mind. And that is the gift that I bring to this whare right now, a strong, solid solution that seeks to solve a long-standing struggle. It aims to break cycles. Today, I deliver my youth homelessness prevention bill into the members' bill ballot. It's not about the crisis, it is about the cure. Prevention is priority, and this bill seeks to create a legal duty to assist, and it ensures that not one rangatahi falls through the gaps. It places onus on agencies and mandates transparent reporting. It is not a radical approach, it is a responsible bill. Wales and Canada have done it, Madam Speaker. They reduced youth homelessness while saving public money. My bill is not ideological, it is evidence-based, rangatahi-centred and community-led. It provides real transformation, but it does require courage, leadership and collaboration. This government is proof that the unthinkable is thinkable. This government is proof that the unimaginable can become reality. So I implore everyone in this House, while they go away for Christmas break and celebrate the festive season, that they hold in their minds and hearts the future of our nation. It does require rangatira, and rangatira must be raised by the village of Aotearoa. Rangatira become who they are by rangatahi. Kia ora.
Vanessa Wenig. Speaker. Last night this House had the first readings of 3 pieces of legislation that will have transformational effects in my electorate of Banks Peninsula. The planning, natural environment and the earthquake-prone building bills will have profound impacts in not only Christchurch and the South Island but also the whole of New Zealand. And in some ways I feel really deeply connected to all of these pieces of legislation because of my prior experiences before coming to Parliament. So last night I talked about how during the earthquakes I was at the Pine Gould building. I led the triage team there, and while everybody who came through our triage tent actually survived, there were many other people who perished in that building, and I know that all of the other first responders who were in that building also hold those memories of those images of that place, and the emotional impact of that earthquake on everybody who was in Christchurch has been huge. The physical devastation was just almost unimaginable. But every person who was there in Christchurch has got a connection to how we responded as well. And I think it's difficult to understand if you haven't been in an emergency situation, if you haven't lived through a crisis and responded. I know Dana and others who have been involved in cyclones and other things know what it's like to have a community response. And so when I stood next to that building, that was a concertinaed, collapsed building off the back spine of the elevator and stairway shaft at the back, it was pretty hard to imagine, what it must have been like to have had to have been in that building after the first lot of earthquakes, because in September that building had been checked. And the previous year, when we had our first lot of earthquakes, that building had been checked and deemed safe enough for people to go back into. And so for the families of those victims and those survivors, and also the families from the devastating loss of the big smoking pile of rubble that was the CTV building, to go through the later response and then the Royal Commission of Inquiry into the buildings and how that and what needed to happen was both re-traumatising, but also, I think, somewhat affirming in the findings and the recommendations that came out of it. And at the time, I remember feeling such a huge sense of relief that this Parliament had responded and agreed to all of the findings of that Royal Commission. But when we get 15 years down the track, we see that actually, in some ways, we're faced with a triage situation. In medicine, when you have a mass casualty situation, you have to triage, you have to do what you can for the most to get the best survival outlook. And what our earthquake-prone buildings legislation is doing is essentially taking what is thousands of buildings across the country that would have been deemed unsafe and not able to be used, and finding a practical way to be able to make safe as many of those as possible in a way that is pragmatic and means that it actually gets done. And to the families of all of those who lost their lives, I want them to be assured that this is not about the money, and I'm not talking about the money, you'll notice that deliberately, although it is billions of dollars, because actually when it comes down to it, this is a pragmatic government that is taking the steps that we need to do. Now, one of those buildings in my electorate is actually Princess Margaret Hospital, and that is something that we need to do something about, yes, absolutely. And I think that the earthquake-prone building and as well as that, the planning and environment bills will help go some ways to getting there. We need to be able to come up with some people have asked me, many people have asked me what we're going to do with that. The answer is we don't know yet, and I want to take the electorate along with me on that journey to figure out and help to advocate for what will be the best outcome, because the worst outcome would be if it sat as a mouldering pile of bricks, attracting adventurers and vandals and rats. So I hope that we can use those to move forward for Banks Peninsula.
Madam Speaker.
Honourable Ginny Anderson.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to use my call today to talk about homelessness in the Hutt Valley. Mark is 47. Mark grew up in Nainai, and he went to Hutt Valley High School. He worked for many years as a builder in a small firm. When that firm folded after the recent downturn in construction work, he took up work as a casual labourer. He sustained a back injury and then received ACC support for some time. When ACC stopped, he used his savings up pretty quickly, and he then went on JobSeeker. But the JobSeeker amount was insufficient to be able to pay for his rent and for food. So he moved in with his sister in Wainuiomata and slept on her couch. The house was already pretty crowded with 4 or 5 children in there already. He felt like he was a burden on that family, and so he decided to move on. He initially slept in his car and moved around the Hutt Valley to find places to sleep.